Hello. My name is Tim. I am an alien. I am not like you. I'm not an engineer. I've never configured a BGP router. The next session is entitled Adventures in RPKI Non-Deployment. Like so much that happens here at NANOG, I do not understand what that means, and it frightens me. Please hold your applause to the end. To be honest with you, about half of the things that you engineers tell me, I don't understand. In other words, I come from the world of carriers. Please be not alarmed. I come to you in peace. I come from a company called TeleGeography. We're a market research firm, and our job is essentially to talk to what for today I'm calling people in the carrier community, which is essentially everyone in our industry minus engineers. So people in sales, marketing, strategy departments at sub-cable operators, network operators, carriers, ISPs, the banks that finance them, and the governments that regulate them. So we collect information on things that you create, such as the internet, package the statistics, and present the statistics in hopefully in a way that helps them understand their business. Well, today I'd like to take the opposite approach, if you don't mind, and attempt to try to explain to you some of the things that they're doing, especially with submarine cables and how it might affect you. Now, I fully realize that I do not need to tell you that I am an alien. You can probably sense my differentness from where you sit. Who is this strange xenomorph, you may well ask yourself, who's arrayed himself in a long-sleeve button-down shirt that's tucked into things that are neither jeans nor cargo shorts? Well, I appreciate your curiosity, and I have to admit I've been curious about you as well, and observing your kind for some time. And I find your intricate social structures fascinating. For example, I'm working on that. I can't really grow a great beard, unfortunately. But for example, the alphas or the dominants in your society appear to mark themselves by the vintage of your T-shirts. A few days ago, I saw a guy in a NANOG 57 T-shirt. Not bad, but the last NANOG I was at, I saw a guy with a T-shirt that was at least 10 years old. And now, questions about and concerns about hygiene aside, that was impressive. And he also was bearded. Surely he was accounted amongst you as a wise one, perhaps a shaman of some sort. Well, I wish to be accepted in your community. I do not have a 10-year-old NANOG T-shirt, but I did come prepared today. I brought my own T-shirt, okay? Now, I don't know. Perhaps I should not continue. I don't know if any of you were at the NANOG meeting in 1975. This is what the T-shirts back then looked like. So I don't know if, probably the folks of you in the back are fortunate enough not to see this atrocity. So what this is, it says NANOG 1975, and it has the theme that year, which is Keep On Truckin'. I know there are prohibitions against, the NANOG organizers often say with the audience not to use offensive language at the speakers, but I don't know if it goes the other way, so let me just ask you this question. Who's the alpha dog now, bitches? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have to curse at you, but you really left me no choice. There's 750 of you and only one of me. And the first rule of presenting is you have to maintain order. Okay, so I want to talk about what's in the mindset of the submarine cable community and carriers and what they may be thinking. And this slide may illustrate, may be familiar to you if you've been at some carrier conferences, the kind where besuited people walk around doing sooty kind of things. Often it starts with a cloud, with the internet displayed as a cloud. That's very important. And then they will use the magic of PowerPoint animations to connect things to said cloud. There's a telephone. It starts out pretty intelligibly, telephone, computer, laptop. Then things can sometimes get a little weird when they sort of insert what they think might be driving internet traffic. Yeah, I don't know about that one. I have no idea what that's doing there. And if you're really lucky, the slide will devolve into a series of NBA catchphrases that make sense not whatsoever. And there you go. You, on the other hand, understand the internet is not technically a cloud. But another difference is that guy is the one that raises the money, doesn't he? Now, I've been a little unfair. People amongst my kind generally are very intelligent, nice people, and they do tend to get it. But there is often a disconnect. There's often a lack of understanding from what you do that doesn't get communicated properly to them. And it's also important to understand that what they do affect your business. And even smart people can make stupid mistakes. And that's what I want to talk about the rest of the talk here. Most famously, about 15 years ago, a group of that dude and his other suited friends decided to build a whole bunch of submarine cables all at the same time, pretty much all on the same route, and partially as a result, demand could never catch up with a huge amount of supply, prices crashed, and there were billions upon billions lost in Chapter 7 and Chapter 11 bankruptcies. You can make the argument that that's been a net benefit, that those bankruptcies have helped subsidize what we today consider the internet, and it's benefited our businesses. Prices are low. A lot of the things we are able to do today might not be possible without those low prices. If you subscribe to that theory, then you'll be pleased to know that not only is there a huge amount of spare capacity left on submarine cables, but people are still building them. So I want to talk about where is this new submarine cable infrastructure occurring? And secondly, I'd like to take a little time to explain or consider why this is occurring. Is it really a case of stupid people doing stupid things? Thirdly, how is it going to affect you? I'm going to pretend that most of you are net buyers of capacity in some sort, in some way. Even if you don't buy transport or IP transit, maybe you peer, and IPT and peering is somewhat fungible. So will this new investment push down prices? And finally, prices are falling fast, and they're falling faster in certain regions where prices have been relatively high. Will we ever reach a point where prices will equalize across the world? Will transport to all places be about the same? Will IPT be about the same? So that's what we're going to cover. First of all, before we even get to the new cables, there's been an awful lot of infrastructure investment in existing cables, and that's been at the dry plant level. In SLTE, technological development. This column chart shows how much total capacity there is in a cable. I picked this one at random. It's the Falcon cable, which is in the Middle East region, but this has happened to pretty much every single cable in the world. When they went into service about 7 or 8 years ago, they thought that they could run 10 gig wavelengths and do 64 of those per fiber pair. And then some nice little innovations came along and with spectrum efficiency, and they realized they could actually do 96, so that increased their potential capacity. Then 40 gig waves came along. They realized, wow, we could more than double what we previously thought is potential for us with 40 times 40 gig waves. And the last we spoke to them, a vendor had told them, had tested their equipment and said that they could likely run 59 times 100 gig waves. So it's a huge amount of untapped capacity that they didn't even realize was there. And this is happening not just on that one cable, but on pretty much all cables. What this line chart is showing is the amount of potential capacity total on systems over time that are lit. So each line is a different summation of all cables in a region of the world. And you would expect that this line to climb up over time, right? I mean, if potential capacity is kind of a fixed thing and lit capacity is going to go up over time, people are going to be buying new wavelengths, and you'll eventually reach 100% of potential capacity and you'll be out of capacity. Well, in fact, for several years, the lines did climb up. We were slowly running out of potential capacity. And then the SLTE investment and new innovations kicked in, and the line started going down. Now, in 2014, we're actually at a lower point than we were 5 years ago in terms of cable fill rate for potential capacity. So what's that mean? When will we finally run out of capacity? Let's look at the Atlantic market. Transatlantic potential capacity here. I'm showing the green line is, let's pretend like there's no further innovations that'll happen. What cable operators have told us in total, they can do about 170 terabits per second if they lit every single wavelength possible across the Atlantic. When would we run out? Well, at current growth rates, we'd run out around 2023, 2024. But what if yet more innovations occur? What if each one of those fibers is capable of running 100 times 100 gig waves? Well, that pushes the horizon out even much further into the 2030s. So with that information, you probably would guess that surely no one's bothering to build any of these things, right? Well, no. There's a lot of construction going on, even today. The line charts here, the bar charts here, are showing how much capital has gone into new submarine cable construction over time. The blue columns are showing what historically happened, 2012 to 2013. In total, there was $3.9 billion spent on new submarine cables. The red bars are showing what's happening in 2014 and 2015. Yet more construction, about $3.3 billion, so it's a lot. And it's kind of interesting if you look at the bottom, even some of the markets that are really well saturated with capacity and are very well supplied, the transatlantic and transpacific markets, those will be getting new cables. So why is this occurring? Is that guy that I showed, the little straw man that I created in the little carrier chart, is he being stupid? Well, in some cases, yes. There are good reasons and there are bad reasons for building cables. First, the dumb reasons. One we will often see is national pride. You particularly see this with PTTs, and they're fairly dominant in a country. You know, there's a certain amount of cachet in owning a cable or participating in a consortium build, and we do see that. A related factor is corporate pride. For some companies, simply leasing capacity is not cool. And I don't really mean that in a flippant way. We do hear this. For them, for example, a lot of Middle Eastern operators have told me that they can't really go to their customers and supply them if they can't say that they actually own some capacity. So there are a lot of new builds going on. And finally, this is the dumbest of the dumb reasons. And you don't see this too often. You saw this a lot 15, 20 years ago. You still see it some now. It's third-party developers coming in, looking at a map, and seeing that there are not a lot of lines across this blue patch of the ocean, and figuring, hey, I got a business plan. In general, financiers are a lot more conservative than they were a decade or 2 decades ago, and these kind of plans generally don't make it too far, but sometimes they do. Okay, the second half of this, why build cables? Here are some of the not dumb reasons for doing it. One, believe it or not, are concerns about capacity exhaustion. Even across the Atlantic, some really big users of bandwidth are beginning to get concerned when looking long term that these old cables, and they are old, some of them are 13 years old, or actually the newest is about 13 years old, won't be able to handle some of the new SLTE innovations. So there's going to be a time when potential capacity will finally cap out. And what do we do then? They're going to need not just one cable, but probably lots of cables. A second reason is connecting new markets. Saw this a lot over the last 20 years. Not so much anymore. Pretty much every country in the world that was not connected to fiber optic capacity now has it. The latest new entrant to the fiber optic club was island nation of Tuvalu, which is a bit southeast of the Solomon Islands. It got a new cable in January of this year, I believe. Providing physical diversity, and this is a fairly reasonable one, I think, especially in areas where cables are prone to break. There are some areas of the world that just seems to happen over and over again. South China Sea is a great example. So for some countries, having 1 cable, 2 cables, sometimes even 3 cables is really not enough, so you want as much diversity as you can. A fourth reason Supplying niche markets. Often the business plans for cables, the traditional business plans is I'm going to build something, I'm going to sell capacity to a bunch of carriers and ISPs. It's just not going to work. Prices are too low. So some cable operators have gotten pretty smart and tried to, you could say, almost subsidize their build by selling part of their capacity to niche markets that might pay a higher price or help guarantee some initial demand. Examples of that are banks that are interested in arbitrage across long distances, oil and gas consumers, and mining. And finally, and this is a little complicated, but the economies of scale of ownership is appealing to some people. And these are fairly sophisticated users. They're not the kind where they just want to plant their flag and say, hey, I own something. But they've done sophisticated modeling of build versus buy, and they're convinced that in the long term, it would benefit them to either own spectrum or a full fiber pair, own a cable, which they can connect their own SLTE, which might allow for much greater bandwidth down the road. And especially for these companies, where there's a lot of capacity across the Atlantic or Pacific, but not a whole lot of spare dark fibers for them to acquire, considering new builds is attractive. And it's important to consider that what makes sense for an individual company may not make sense for the industry at large. So, in other words, microeconomic logic does not necessarily equal macroeconomic logic. It may make perfect sense for them to build, may not make sense for the industry as a whole, but hey, makes sense for them, it's probably going to happen. Next few slides are illustrating some of the dumb and not dumb reasons to build. I picked this one, I hope I don't get into too much trouble, as kind of a dumb reason to build. I have not, as a caveat, I have not looked at their business plan. There may be a very good reason to build this cable, but on the surface, I kind of question it. This cable is called Brazil-Europe, and it would go from Brazil to Europe. It's kind of, hey, there's nothing in between Europe and South America, why don't we build, even though pretty much everyone I've talked to, they want to reach the content that's in Miami or in North America. And there may be some political reasons to build this. The Brazilian government is somewhat involved in this cable, and it's a way of thumbing their nose at the NSA, perhaps, at least when they present it to the press. Now, here's a reason that's among the good reasons to build. Hibernia Express. We show this as a sort of a crooked line. That's just for illustrative purposes to help you be able to see this compared to some of the other lines that are kind of pale on the map. But it actually goes in about as straight of a line as possible. And that's to limit propagation delay on the cable. It will be the shortest across the Atlantic. And that's appealing to banks that are interested in arbitraging market transactions in London and in New York. Hibernia will be able to sell capacity at this at a highly marked up rate to those HFT traders or algorithmic traders, and then also sell capacity to regular carriers, content providers, ISPs. So it's a way of subsidizing their build. Here's another example of a cable that is using, for part of their business plan, sales to a specific sector. This is the Trident cable. It's one of 3 competing systems or competing ideas for a new cable that would go from Western Australia, Perth, up to Singapore. This one, it starts in Perth at the bottom, but then you see this odd little dot up much further north in Western Australia. And that's to connect mining communities in Western Australia. So that's kind of a neat idea that they have. And finally, one that's been in the works for a while, but one is just recently publicly announced, is the faster cable. In a way, this is the successor to Unity. There are a number of the Unity cable, a number of the original members in Unity were involved in this, including Google. And I would probably place this under the build versus buy idea for a good reason to build a cable. There are probably some sensible reasons to do this, even though there's lots of spare wavelengths available on other systems across the Pacific. So those are just 4 reasons. There are lots of other submarine cables that are planned. Obviously, I'm not going to have time for. What I was just looking at, those are screenshots from submarinecablemap.com, which is free. If you're interested in the other cables, you can go explore those. All right, so moving on to the second half of our presentation. Will this new investment push down prices? Well, are you kidding? Of course it will, and prices have been falling even in the absence of the new cables. This is tracking transport prices, 10 gig waves, pop to pop, on 3 major routes, US South America, Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic, and they've fallen tremendously. Now, are we seeing transport prices that are beginning to, all over the world, beginning to approach what's kind of always been taken as a baseline price to measure everything else against, which is London, New York? That's always been the lowest price. Well, yeah, prices have been compressing. The columns here, the height of the columns here show the difference, the ratio of price over the London, New York baseline route. And you can see in 2004, prices were pretty high in London, or Los Angeles, Tokyo, and Miami, Sao Paulo. The difference is much smaller now. The ratio is much, much smaller. How about our other routes of the world? Again, this is transport prices. Have prices compressed compared to London, New York? Definitely. London, Johannesburg used to be an incredibly expensive route, but there have been lots and lots of cables built on both the west and east side of Africa, and partially, and there's also been a lot of backhaul built within South Africa. Prices have really collapsed there. London, Mumbai as well. There have been 2 huge systems built between Europe and Southeast Asia. That has helped compress prices, and there are 2 more planned, and they all go through Egypt. They're all on the same route, so I'm guessing that prices are going to fall even further. So you'd think with just looking at the pictures that, yeah, man, prices are about the same. Well, I don't want to get too carried away. If you look at the actual numbers, the price differences are still fairly significant. The median price for London, New York 10 gig wave, you're just buying onesies, $7K a month. It can be had for lower, but that's the median price. These are all median prices. London, Johannesburg, the median prices as of the end of last year was still $250,000, so there's still a big difference. So what about IP transport prices? You can make a pretty good argument, I think, that there's a strong linkage between transport prices and IPT and parts of the world outside what I'll call the core of the internet, which is North America and Europe. Essentially, if you think of it as a single price, there's one IPT price in the core countries, and then you can arbitrage the IPT and elsewhere by buying transport from these other locations, Africa, Asia, Middle East, to the core countries. So as transport prices fall, so too will IPT in those locations. We've seen a correlation, certainly, between Asia prices and Trans-Pacific prices. This shows Tokyo IPT and Los Angeles to Tokyo transport. They both fell. And also down to South America, this is Sao Paulo IPT and Miami, Sao Paulo transport. And all these prices are normalized at monthly price per meg. So yeah, prices are falling. But will we ever reach a point at which prices are the same all around the world? Well, we've seen some signs that it's headed that way. But really, I'm not so certain when we will actually see that point, if ever. This all is like the previous slides that showed price ratios. Here, instead of comparing prices against transport, London, New York, we're looking at IPT prices in Frankfurt. Now you can see on a few of the routes, prices have compressed. But in some of the routes, the red columns showing 2014, the prices are actually higher now compared to Frankfurt than they were 4 years ago. And that's because prices in Frankfurt have been falling too. Prices are falling everywhere. So it's kind of hard to catch up to something when that thing is also moving. Well, that's Frankfurt. That's kind of a special case in that that's about the lowest price in the world. There's a very really rich peering fabric there that may be a kind of a competitor to IP Transit, and it's very well connected. What about New York? Well, here, and this is on a log scale, by the way, this is London comparing IPT from that you can purchase as a port in New York versus Tokyo. New York, the median price was $1.60. Again, median, that's not the lowest price we're seeing in the market, but the median price per meg. Tokyo was around $8.50, I think, in this observation. And the Tokyo prices have been falling faster over the last 4 years compared to New York, 26% CAGR, or negative 26% versus 21% declines each year in New York. So yeah, Tokyo is catching up. So what happens if we, just for fun, if we apply that CAGR to the future? And this is not the way to do forecasts, not the right way to do price forecasts. It's just for fun. I'm just applying a static number to the future. What will happen? When will these points meet? Well, I tried to plot it out, and even though this is a 16 by 9 format, I ran out of room. So let's just go to the next slide. Oh, no, sorry about that. Okay, well, let's move on even further. Okay, 2039, that's when prices will meet at the current rates. Now, likely the dynamics are going to be different than what I'm showing here, but it's just a gross illustration of the fact that singularity inside of equalization across all markets, for spot prices, basic prices, we're not seeing it yet. And what's preventing this? Well, the most basic reason is transport is still a factor. Transport's still expensive in a lot of destinations, and it hasn't fallen to zero. And also, there are some reasons peculiar to IP transit markets. One is in certain cities, there's a lack of robust IP backbone provider competition, unfavorable regulatory environments, expensive backhaul and cross connects in those cities. And another point I didn't make here is that there's also sometimes a value of buying IP transit in a city if you're looking to interconnect with local ISPs. So there's a latency value of buying locally rather than tromboning on a transport link to the United States or Europe. So finally, concluding here, lots of new cables are on their way. Some are built for stupid reasons. Most are not built for stupid reasons. They're solid corporate reasons. But it doesn't really matter because prices were falling to begin with, and they're going to continue falling partially as a result of the new capacity. IP transit will fall partially as a result of the transport price declines. And prices are falling everywhere, but we are not within sight of a moment when prices will be the same wherever you are in the world. Now, I guess we have a few minutes for questions, so I'll...
Unfortunately, Tim, we're going to have to cut it right at the conclusion of your presentation here, and I would like to have you take the questions out of the plenary.
That's fine. That's fine. So let me just conclude with a quote to inspire us all, hopefully, and I've presented this in a language that you all will understand, which is Klingon. Now, fortunately, the Klingon the Klingon font didn't come through here, but this Masakan. Maybe I should have done this in Dothraki. Maybe you would have thought that's cooler. I don't know. But this, it kind of gets in the mindset of both the Klingon Empire and in the minds of submarine cable operators. To survive, we must expand. It doesn't matter if they're doing it for dumb reasons or not dumb reasons. Prices are falling, you will benefit. So thanks for tolerating me, and I will take your questions if you have them later on.